So, good evening to one and all. Good evening to our speaker, Professor Gyana Swain. So, he is not new on this platform. He has earlier given a talk, and on that day, it was fixed that he will give a talk related to that topic. And today is that day. That day has come today. So, as the convener, Uh, it's my responsibility to introduce the speaker, though I have already introduced in the earlier talk. Yet I have given this, opportunity to my student Pradeep to introduce the speaker today, and I will introduce the topic. And later on, Professor Swain will start his deliberation on the topic, theory and practice of multiculturalism in India. So now I request Pradeep to start his introduction to the speaker. Yes, Pradeep.
Thank you, sir. Am I audible, sir?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Good evening, a very good evening to one and all. Respected Professor Shyama Prasad Guru, sir. Uh, Respected Surya, sir. And respected Professor Gyana Swain, sir. Respected Dr. Himanshu Sekhar Mishra, sir, and all other dignitaries and participants present on this platform. It is such an honor and pleasure for me to introduce the keynote speaker of today's discussion. I thank Dr. Mishra sir for providing me this opportunity. In today's discussions, we are having Professor Gyana Swain sir as our keynote speaker, who will be speaking on the title Theory and Practice of Multiculturalism in India. Professor Swain is currently associated with the School of Political Science, Gangadhar Meher University, Sambalpur. Earlier, he has taught in Delhi University and Ravenshaw University. The speaker has done his MA from Hyderabad Central University and PhD from Delhi University. His research interests are applied political theory, state politics, etc. Um, he has also worked in various research projects, and he is currently working as a state coordinator for CSDS uh, Lokniti since 2016. He has also worked as a research associate for 6 months in developing country's research center in a planning commission project. He has also worked as a research assistant for 6 months in a BA program committee, and he has contributed to many other research projects. He has a number of publications in many reputed journals. Some of his works includes Analyzing Structure of Patriarchy, Multicultural Conception of Citizenship, Global Environmental Issues, Indian Politics, and the Nature of State in India. Thank you so much, sir, for accepting our invitation and to grace us with your valuable ideas and inputs. We are eager to listen from you. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Pradeep. I welcome to Professor Sudhanaran Mishra sir. And in many important talks, he is a regular participant. So let me introduce the topic as the convener. The title of today's talk is the theory and practice of multiculturalism in India. So specifically, the speaker will speak how India has been having the tradition of multiculturalism. The intellectual tradition in the West always claim that the discourse on multiculturalism is their contribution to the world. Now, before West actually began to discuss about multiculturalism, Indian Constitution took a positive steps to accommodate various groups and different minorities. Indian experience of multiculturalism is an unique in the sense that it is practiced as part of our day-to-day life experience without focusing much on the theoretical understanding. Now, multiculturalism is a part of our life experience is very much there within Hindu philosophy and even in different religions like Buddhism and Jainism. Thus, this suggests that non-Western experience of dealing with challenges of ethno-religious pluralism is longer than most of the Western countries. Here the speaker argues that Indian constitution embodies two distinct approaches to the accommodation of differences. One is the integrationist and second is the restricted multicultural. The major challenges to multiculturalism has been the failure of policymakers to elaborate normative ideological resources for the justification of multicultural right. Now, these happenings is because of overly narrow understanding of the requirement of national unity. The long shadow of countries' partition based on religion limits our political imagination with regard to accommodate differences. So I hope the participants have got a sense of today's topic, and let's listen to Professor Swain. Professor Swain will unpack all these things, whatever I just said, and let us understand the practice of multiculturalism and the theory of multiculturalism in India in comparison to the West. So with this introduction, I welcome once again to Professor Swain. Now, Professor Swain, you can start your deliberation.
Okay, thank you. First of all, my pranam to Professor Surya sir and Syama Guru sir, who have been very kind enough to come here and spend some time to discuss on such a very important topic. So thank you to both my teachers. Also thanks to Himanshu, who has been continuously raising several pertinent questions, debates and discussions, and I am looking at it for the last continuously 1 year. So this is not a mean achievement. Thank you, Himanshu, for doing such a wonderful job for the students and the researchers of Sambalpur University and throughout Odisha. And I'm extremely grateful that you gave me 2 opportunities to speak. So in that way also I'm equally thankful to you. Today I am speaking on a topic which is, it has not actually captured, I would say, the imagination of the social scientists as it should have been. See, remember, we got independence in 1947, and multiculturalism as a theoretical discourse also roughly started around that time. But look at the tragedy. The essence of multiculturalism, you find all nitty-gritties of multiculturalism you will find in India. But the theoretical explanations of multiculturalism in the West have always ignored India as a classic example of multiculturalism. So, but recently multiculturalism that in the West, they have begun to take India seriously as an example of multiculturalism as a political discourse. So that's why I feel that the Indian model of multiculturalism needs to be discussed more elaborately, because people like Will Kimilka, people like Young, and there are many others who spoke extensively about multiculturalism, and they have taken Canada, Australia as their points of reference, because they see that the constitution has been modeled in those countries in terms of, a multicultural framework. That's why they take into account the constitutions of Canada and Australia, and there are many other new countries that are also emerging. But nobody gives examples of India as a classic example of multicultural state. I don't know why, because for me, India is a classic example. But when we take into account multiculturalism in India, particularly the theoretical foundations of multiculturalism, we also need to take into account the larger framework in which multiculturalism as a political discourse has been framed and conceptualized in India. So our first task here is to theorize the Indian experience of multiculturalism since independence. But before that, I have already informed, in my abstract thing, that the non-Western experience of multiculturalism is actually much longer than the multicultural experience of Western countries. But that's what they are not taking into account, particularly the African countries, Asian countries. So that's why this very topic is actually very unique, that why the debates and discourses on multiculturalism is very important. So that's why the first part of my lecture would be that I would be dealing with the theorizing the multicultural experience in India. Why and how multiculturalism has been articulated in the Indian Constitution and in the Indian political system as well. Because apart from the Indian Constitution, there are also several other occasions where the system itself has espoused the cause of multicultural beliefs and other ideas related to multiculturalism. So the first part would be on theorizing the multicultural experience. Okay, so I have noted down some of the things that we need to point out at. Okay, so the thing is that see, the Indian Constitution actually embodies two distinct approaches to the accommodation of difference. Okay, they are called as integrationist, and the second one is restricted multicultural. Restricted multicultural can also be termed as weak multicultural. Okay, and weak multicultural, has solid backing from people like Will Kimilka, who say that weak multicultural is a better position than a strong multicultural, because it has better capacities to negotiate with minority rights. So in that way, India is safe. Okay, so but the question that the crux of my argument in this part would be that even if we take into account the two distinctive aspects of Indian multiculturalism, that is integrationist approach and the weak multicultural approach, I would be speaking about the first thing is that the lack of adequate normative support in India's constitutional vision. Okay, so the normative deficit at India's constitutional framework, when they speak about multiculturalism, remember, it continues to be politically very, very influential, right? Because the way we try to articulate minority rights, the way we try to articulate or accommodate different diverse groups and minorities, it is actually more or less espoused in terms of political accommodation, right? Because mostly the political parties are being benefited from that. So even if it is part of the constitutional framework, but the constitutional value of such kind of integration, is questionable, because most of the times political parties, they use it for their own benefit, and that's why it has more political value and it is more politically more influential, the debates. Okay, so the state assistance to the minority cultures, it has been seen as an illegitimate concession motivated by the electoral considerations. Okay, do you know that the debate, particularly the 2000, the rise of BJP as a political force, they used particularly this argument to come to the power, that the state has been very, very passive, and it has given more and more concessions to the minorities for political gains. So this is the problem, that we do not have a theoretical understanding of the multicultural practices, and instead of doing that, we actually try to accommodate minorities as a political concession, without realizing its implications. And now here, part of the political debate, whether we should give concessions or we should not give any concessions. Of late, I don't know why the debate on reservation has stopped, but there was a time when people began debating on reservation as a political issue, right? And also today also, reservation has the potential to, divide the country, but somehow because of the political calculations, they have stopped it. So, that's the key question. Okay, so here, what I'm trying to say here is that it is not a kind of position what Ashish Nandi actually speaks about. Actually, Ashish Nandi speaks that as a position that the modern state doesn't have the capacity to accommodate the religious, any kind of difference, right? And that's why we should actually focus on accommodating difference in our day-to-day life experience and practices, right? I'm not speaking that. What I am trying to point out here is that the main challenge to multiculturalism, okay, in India has been the failure of policymakers to elaborate, normative ideological resources for the justification of multicultural rights, mostly on account of an overly narrow understanding of requirements of national unity, right? So we use national unity to support multiculturalism. We use national unity to oppose multiculturalism, right? So national unity is a very buzzword for both the right-wing political parties and the progressive political parties, including the Congress. I will show you how. I will give you one particular instance where all these parties, both the left, the right, and the centrist parties, they come together and they espouse the cause of national unity, even though they have contrasting opinions on many other issues. Okay, so the long shadow of the country's partition based on religious identities, it continues to limit our political imagination with regard to accommodation of difference, right? So everywhere we try to see that, it comes to our mind that religion was the reason behind our partition, right? So that's why it is very, very important. Okay, so let's try to understand the integrationist approach more elaborately. Okay, see, first of all, there was a debate in the Constituent Assembly. I'm going back to 1940s, the late 1940s, where the debate on the Constituent Assembly was very, very prominent. And in one of the debates on Constituent Assembly, there was a debate on giving special rights, political rights to religious minorities, and particularly Muslims. And surprisingly, it was opposed by everyone, including the Congress, the left, and of course Hindu Mahasabha and other people. They all opposed it. And I will, and whereas for the tribals and other kinds of backward see, you know why they opposed it? They said, no, for national unity, this will not be a proper way to respect the religion, and it will be an impediment to national unity. But whereas the other kinds of minorities, like the tribals, the scheduled castes, and other kinds of minorities, people made elaborate arrangements for providing adequate representation, right? So we see two kinds of minorities. One is religious minority, and the other is what I can say, these caste-based identities, minorities. But why the Indian government the India's political system and the constitution adopts different stands for different kind of minorities, it is argued here is that it is because of the fact that we do not have a theoretical, normative backing to conceptualize multiculturalism as a framework of our political system. We only do certain kind of adjustments to survive as a political system. This is what I said in the beginning, right? So for different kind of minorities, we treat in a different way. Okay, so that's why. The convergence of all these political parties is complete. For Muslims, on the one hand, they take a very different opinion, and whereas for these kind of minorities, they take a different kind of opinion, right? So the integrationist approach, and I'll tell you, a very important quote by Jawaharlal Nehru, okay, in this context, okay, how the convergence of liberal and the nationalist concerns, they take place, and people like, Nehru also say, with regard to the religious minorities special quota, it was actually originally it was there, but in 1949 it was amended. Okay, so I am quoting Jawaharlal Nehru here. Okay, Nehru commended that, this abolition as a historic turn in our destiny. He confessed that he had never been convinced about them, and by doing away with this reservation business shows that we are really sincere about this business of having a secular democracy. Okay, so that's the kind of stand that we are having. Nehru taking a position with regard to religious minorities, but same Nehru taking a different position with regard to the tribals and other kinds of minorities. Okay, so reservations in the case of ex-untouchables and tribals, by contrast, were easier to accommodate within a liberal nationalist framework, right? So what the point that I'm trying to argue here is that there is no problem actually, even if let's for a moment we argue that yes, for national unity, providing reservation based on religion will be actually an impediment. Yes, let's for a moment I accept that, and I accept also the argument that for tribals and other kinds of minorities we should provide certain kind of reservations. The point is, the problem is, the major problem is not here. The problem is, see, if you look at the language of reservations, that's problematic, because I'm sure all of you must be knowing it, that the way reservations began, it was actually a temporary measure. For 10 years, then it was extended for another 10 years. It was a temporary measure. But do you remember the language of multicultural theories? They don't speak about these temporary measures. They speak about spatial representation rights, right? So, So the spatial representation rights aspect is actually missing. We are providing reservation as a executive support, temporary support, short-term mechanisms. Okay. So here, multiculturalism as a theory in India, lacked a particular theoretical framework. We always advocated some kind of temporary measurements. Okay, so we can call it as temporary affirmative action provisions and not as a multicultural right. Right? You look at the theories of multiculturalism, look at the theory of Wilke-Milka, look at the theory of, Young, other people also have spoken, look at the theory of Taylor. Okay, they all spoke about multicultural rights. But here, we don't conceive the rights of, tribals. We only give some kind of concessions. Recently, that Forest Rights Act, they actually speak about some of these rights. But this is a recent innovation. But if you look at the beginning of Constitution and the political discourse, these things happened. Okay. So the nationalists rejected the quotas as a means of recognizing social identity and protecting the distinct interests of all groups. Okay, so the spatial representation provisions were not intended as, remember, permanent instruments of self-government or for any groups. Okay, so these are basically short-term mechanisms so which would enable the realization of future state of affairs in which the spatial representation would no longer be necessary. Actually, this was the thought process, that in future we will not we are not going to use these kind of spatial representation rights, right? And legislative quotas for Dalits and Adivasis were not intended to serve as a form of representation, right? As such. Okay. So that's the point that I would like to address here, right? So this is the problem with the integrationist approach. Even if we try to integrate the minorities, particularly the scheduled tribes, scheduled castes, and the religious minorities, look at the perception here, right? So this is where, and now let's go back to the weak multiculturalist position. Right? What is happening in weak multiculturalism position? Okay. See, if you look at the religious freedom and the family laws, okay, the rights of linguistic and tribal groups, okay, so they all come within the weak multicultural position. Okay. So, and also the good part of the Indian Constitution is that Indian Constitution makers adopted a wide range of, religious freedom for individuals and groups. So, unlike many other secular constitutions, the Indian Constitution allows associational and institutional autonomy and includes specific provisions for public profession of religious identity, right? So that's why these are all beauties of Indian Constitution, right? So here, actually, if you look at the Kimilka's argument about the weak multicultural positions, they argue that he actually takes a position on this particular question. So he says that weak multiculturalism actually offers better protections for individuals and vulnerable groups within minorities, in particular women. Okay, but the question with regard to India is not with the approach adopted for the accommodation of diversity, right? It is with the normative resources for the restricted multiculturalism which remained deficient because of the lack of theoretical orientations, right? I will tell you how this happens. if you look at the weak multicultural position and the diversity aspect, again, let's go back to the Indian Constituent Assembly debates and how the national identity question was created. I mean, when we think about India as a nation, we think about India as, we think about ourselves as citizens of this great country, and how this was articulated in Indian Constituent Assembly. The language that was used in the Constituent Assembly was, purely a liberal political framework, even as a civic engagement. I mean, you see that in liberal political framework, we are encouraged for civic engagement, right? So here, in largely the citizenship was constructed in civic terms, right? So, consisting in citizenship of a state where the group membership of individuals, it was considered as irrelevant from the standpoint of rights. So remember, when we speak about rights, I'm going back to the Constituent Assembly debates, the rights of the individual, particularly the way individuals' association with the state was considered. It was discussed widely in terms of a liberal political framework, right? And we were mainly respected as individuals, not as members of any particular group. That came much later through different debates and discussions. Providing in terms of some concessions to groups, not as entitlements, right? So the group entitlement was absent in the debate of Constituent Assembly. First it began its discussion as as individual units. We all as individuals, and we must enjoy certain rights. You take also the case of Ambedkar, the father of Indian Constitution. Even he was also brought up in highly sophisticated English liberal education model. So he was also, in fact, the last debate which I spoke about, that short tenure of reservation, 10 years. He was the one who framed it, right? So that short-term measure of, in fact, he was the one who also said that I don't see reservation as a permanent feature of Indian Constitution. I would like to abolish it. So he was a staunch supporter of absolute equality, right? So even though he was at pain to describe the difficulties of the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes in India, but he was an absolute supporter of absolute freedom of individuals and equality. So because he was Western educated. So the point that I'm trying to say here is that individuals, so the group membership of individuals, it was irrelevant from the standpoint of rights. So given its links with national unity, okay, so the liberal language was espoused in the Constituent Assembly by a wide range of nationalists of diverse ideological moorings. For example, Hindu traditionalists and the westernized socialists. Okay, so the liberals and the nationalist concerns, they converged in debates with the Muslim family law, so that secularism was construed in nationalist opinion largely in terms of equal citizenship rights for individuals. Okay, remember the key question here. So rights of religious, so the rights to religious freedom of groups were recognized, but it was held in a subordinate status, and would be restricted to the extent that this conflicted with the rights to equality of individuals, right? So the individual rights question was given importance. And the rights of different groups, they were kept in a subordinate position, and they were given some concessions just for the purpose of accommodation, right? So that's why we are looking at the problems. Okay, so here, if you look at the discourse on the multicultural framework in India, you see that there are a couple of things that I would like to say here. Is that okay? First, now I'm speaking about the implications of such a theory-less multicultural framework, I would say, in India. So I would like to, identify three implications. Okay, the first, even as group differentiated rights have expanded. I mean, you see that group differentiated rights have expanded significantly in the last 20-30 years. Okay, I mean, it began with consociationalism to affirmative actions. It has become more and more influential. Okay, so so here, the group identities and the way they try to demand certain perks from the Indian political system is also increasing day by day, right? I mean, because we started as a small concession to different groups, now it has become a major issue. Look at recently I think the Sekhar committee report, they suggested that the Muslims should be given some kind of reservation. Right? Of course, it was not implemented. But and look at the way the OBCs, even though they are not, they don't belong to any kind of socially oppressed categories, but they also demand that we should be given some kind of reservation. They should be given some kind of special rights. But the point is that the Constitution has allowed these kind of representations to grow. So it has also helped the political system to grow as a more mature democratic political system, because groups are emerging from time to time, right? India is emerging from a conservative society to a progressive society. I mean, there was a time when the LGBT rights, nobody actually spoke about those rights. But today, people are very, very comfortable speaking about LGBT rights, right? So I think this is the positive of, these kind of debates, and, it has actually helped it, right? And also you look at the Indian Constitution has also been equally adaptive, because after the Sahavano incident, okay, it has also been very, very protective of the minorities. So that way, Indian Constitution is one of the most elaborate constitutions as far as the minority rights are concerned. But here again, I would try to identify certain problems with the way the minorities and the minority rights have been conceptualized within the multicultural framework. Okay, because during the Sahavano debate, particularly the policy makers, okay, they failed to elaborate substantive equality arguments for spatial treatment in terms for non-domination or group oppression. Okay, but the question which remain unarticulated is that why Muslims ought to have greater freedom from the state intervention than the majority Hindus, whose religious laws have been subject to state reforms since 1950s. Nobody actually answers this question. This is a very uncomfortable question, right? Why the Muslims, they will get more concession than the majority community, because we have largely accommodated them in terms of concessions. We have not developed a theoretical framework to accommodate minorities in India. That's why people are now questioning it. That's why now people are questioning it. Particularly the people who are ruling, they are questioning it. Why we should give concessions? People, you have given concessions for the last 70 years. Why we should give concessions? So it has largely remained as, what I can say, unarticulated. Okay. So, and particularly how this concession would help or contribute to the national development. Or let's say realization of an equal society or just society. Nobody actually elaborates this question. Okay, so the move to include Muslims within the ambit of affirmative action policies, I told you that Sekhar committee spoke about that. It was a executive led and unaccompanied by legislative debates, right? So these days no one believes in legislative debates, deliberations. We have executives to implement it. We have certain ideas and we will implement it. The executive will implement it. So it lacks a debate, legislative debates. Okay. So which has, and in fact, remember, the legislative debates have a potential to build a broader consensus in their favor. Okay. So so the growing normative deficit of group differentiated rights has political implications. Okay, so it has also political implications. So it has meant that the state assistance for particular groups appears as an illegitimate conception motivated solely by considerations of buying electoral support from the group, and crucially as detracting from the national interest or the common good, right? So this is what people are now debating. This is what people are now trying to say. Okay, so the Hindu right, with its rhetoric of putting the national interest first and criticism of minority appeasement, that special provisions for minorities are a form of group partiality, they have largely been benefited by such an argument. So if at all the right-wing political parties, they have been benefited by such a debate, it is because of the kind of policies that we have adopted and the normative political framework that we could not pursue to support it. Now we are paying price for it. Okay, now we are paying price for it. So this is what basically I argue here. This is what I basically argue here, because why I am saying here that multiculturalism no doubt is a very important topic, and the political exigencies of contemporary India suggests that we must develop a normative framework to debate on the existence of minorities and their plight in a political system itself. Okay, because people are, every day we are looking at the newspapers, we see that minorities feel, they are not very safe. So definitely democracy is at stake, right? And the democratic credentials of India also are at stake. But whom to be blamed? See, that's the question that I am trying to identify here. It is not the right-wing politics or somebody, they cannot be blamed for that. Actually, the kind of debates that we had in Constituent Assembly, and particularly with regard to the minorities, they are responsible for it, and we have not built a proper normative theoretical framework to debate on those issues. That's why there is a that's why there is a problem. Okay, so that is why I say that multiculturalism in India whatever we have today, whatever political practices, they are the best practices, and the Indian Constitution is the best model. But still, there are areas of concern, and it needs to be addressed, particularly the academicians and people and the policymakers who frame policies in the Constitution. So, the final thing that I would like to say here is that, just few lines, is that particularly the lessons for the broad, a larger multiculturalism framework. Okay, what India has to offer to the multiculturalism theoretical framework. Okay, so if you look at the experience of India and Asia in particular, the liberal framework of understanding multiculturalism, okay, and not only understanding, comprehending and evaluating multiculturalism, okay, is largely inadequate. Because look at multiculturalism as a concept. The strength of multiculturalism lies in individuals and their freedom. Whereas most of the Asian countries, let's take the case of India or any other South Asian country, China and other things. So look at their experience. Here, the individual's identity is not important. There are many people where the groups are also equally very, very important, and most of the, what I would say, most of the deprivations, they occur at a group level, right? So, liberalism as a political framework to understand the multicultural aspects of a political system in Asian countries is largely inadequate. Okay, so that we have to understand. So, and in Indian context, particularly the considerations of national unity and development, communitarian conceptions of secularism, and democratic values of equal status and dignity have been significant. We have actually largely tried to identify these questions, in a very significant way. So, a multicultural theory actually that takes at its starting point the experience of Asia and Africa will need to go beyond the said liberal framework. Okay, and they have to engage with different traditions, particularly the religious traditions, socialist traditions, the radical democratic traditions, for the justification of group rights. Right? So, if you go back to the Western conception of the debate between individual rights versus group rights, India is actually a classic example of studying those theoretical understandings. Right? How to accommodate the groups. Okay. My take on this particular question is that neither you require a liberal political framework nor a communitarian framework to address this question. Because when you think about a political system, you need to work out a balance between these things, right? So even if in theory we say, oh, liberal political system or communitarian political system, there is no such, there is nothing called as a communitarian political system. We only speak in theory. Tell me one example of a communitarian governance system. Is there any communitarian governance system? I have not come across any such thing. Or I have not also equally come across any such political system which is 100% liberal, right? So we actually have to frame a government and also frame the governance mechanisms which have to accommodate both the liberal values and the group values, so that there can be a balance. And Indian Constitution have tried their best. But what they lacked as far as the multicultural practices are concerned, they have taken the minority rights as a short-term measure. They are not giving it as a permanent feature or multicultural rights. That's what the question, that is the big question, larger question that I'm trying to identify and problematize here. But otherwise, I find Indian Constitution as a very balanced document. It is neither a liberal document nor a, as we say, a communitarian document. It is a very, very balanced document. So, with these words, I would like to hand over the mic to Dr. Himanshu. And thank you very much for giving me opportunity. I would be very happy to receive few questions, if at all of you can have. Thank you.
So thank you, Professor Swain. While reading your abstract, I was getting a sense that your abstract was leading me to a kind of Indian political theory. You were trying to think about whether India has its own multiculturalism or India can contribute to the intellectual tradition of multiculturalism. An interesting point you made in your abstract that if you look at the day-to-day life experience, that experience from that you can also sense multiculturalism. If you look the Hindu philosophy or the other tradition or different religions like Buddhism and Jainism, you can also get the sense of multiculturalism. I was thinking that you will speak on those points, how in Hindu philosophy the sense of multiculturalism is there, right? How in Buddhism and Jainism the sense of multiculturalism is there, and why you think that in the day-to-day experience, life experience, you see the multiculturalism. Otherwise, since I have read multiculturalism, I understand your points. I think to understand you, reading about multiculturalism is first, right? So now I welcome Professor Surjanaran Mishra to give his observation on your talk.
Yes, well, sir. I thank initially Himanshu. I saw it around 11 o'clock in the night that Gyana will be speaking, and in a very sensitive topic. And I am happy that my friend Syama Prasad is here also. But the question is, in order to understand the multicultural base of Indian society after independence, we have to dig into the past. India is unlike other Western countries who have accepted the secular base of their society because there was controversy between the religious institution and state apparatus. No such conflict was there in the Indian society, which is has a recorded history of more than 5,000 years. So actually, Indian situation is, it is religiously neutral. And when you look at the Indian society and compartmentalize, you may find Hindus are in majority, but at the same time, you have to accept Hinduism is not a religion. If you strictly adhere to the definition of Encyclopedia Britannica, in order to be identified as a religion, you must have a date of birth, a holy guru, and holy book. All other religions, including the youngest Indic religion, Sikhism, comes under these rubrics, whereas Hinduism cannot qualify under the three prerequisites. So in that model, we have to accept the Indian society without looking to the so-called quote-unquote religious biases. So rightly you have quoted some of the clips from the Constituent Assembly debates and framing of the Indian Constitution preamble, liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith and worship, as well as Article 14 and 15, and from Article 25 to 28. When you look at the framing of the Indian Constitution in a very peculiar and disturbing period of Indian history, when India was divided or partitioned on the ground of religion, retaining a sizable chunk of the estranged Islamic community in India, India has had to pursue a policy of religious neutrality. But unfortunately, over the years, the nature of political process and the character of so-called pseudo-secularism and creating vote bank politics, we have created a kind of difference among ourselves. You have quoted Sekhar committee report and non-implementation of the recommendations of Sekhar committee. Well, your presentation was based on purely the issue of affirmative action for different categories, particularly looking into the suffering minorities. And also you have referred to the absence of debate on reservation these days, whereas multicultural debate in the Indian context is becoming more political than cultural. So a nation thrives not under politics, but under culture. If we cannot give culture precedence over politics, what will happen? India should have politics of culture instead of having culture of politics. We have adhered to the latter part than the previous part, which is a contribution of Indian society, polity, economy and culture since ancient days. Sarva Dharma Sambhava, tolerance, they are contributed from the Indian scripts to different phases of our life. So looking at that particular background, when you we analyze the multicultural framework, we have to have a basic understanding of a multicultural society. You see, for the last 5 months and 10 days, I am in USA. Because I have no other work, I am going through the different categories of the materials available. See, only 246 years of history, recorded history we have got. Though the first Native Americans were the Asians, they came from Siberia to live here. And it was after 1600, we found that once the Byzantine Empire was collapsed and Ottoman Empire took up Turkey, the Silk route of trade was closed. The silk was coming from China and other places, and we were getting gold, silver, wool, other materials. That route was closed. So the Europeans started voyaging towards the west to know what is available for trade. They found the new world. So 1492 was the base point when Columbus arrived in East Indies, and the Italian explorer Amerigo Vespucci, he landed on American soil, for which we call it Africa now, and we find that this country, because of its location and locational advantage, that major European countries came here, beginning with Spanish. The first city in the United States of America is St. Augustine in Florida. And Connecticut was the area in New England that the first colony was established. And James forwarded the voyage for which a Jamestown was established in present-day Maryland. So that is the beginning of colonizing, and we know that prior to 4th July 1776, the Declaration of Independence, it was United Colonies. And when you look into that the tolerance part was, the Americans were intolerant of Asian immigration for a large part of life. There are a number of Sikh riots in Canada, riots in New Jersey, New York, and other places against, because they pursued a policy of melting pot. Melting pot means the whites accept the brownies or black Indians or blackish Indians, non-white Indians. And that also created the Bad Act of 1917, and also relaxation in 1946, allowing 100 immigrations from India. But in 1955, a great society concept was given by Lyndon B. Johnson. It opened the discharge, and there was no distinction. So on the basis of educational achievement, aspirations, job availability, people were given. And today, the American population has got a true multicultural base. Asians are the largest, and among them, Indians are the second largest population in India, United States of America, and you find 20 Indian Americans are in coveted positions in that kind of tolerance it has created. So a multicultural society always creates space for others, attitude of tolerance and accommodation for others cannot thrive. Mere politics will not do that. And you have tried, of course, peripherally to address these issues. I congratulate you to take such a big topic and could concise it within the limited period for the understanding of our students. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Surya sir. Now I welcome Syama Prasad Guru sir to give his
namaskar.
observation. Sir, you have to unmute, sir.
Okay.
Guru sir, you have to unmute.
भाईना नमस्कार
नमस्कार बंधु ना बंधुक तमे बंधु ना बंधुक
अरे बाबा very strong words
okay okay
आपण अछंती ना फेरलेनी
मु बोलथे मते बोलथे बाइडेन देई देबो एटी सिटीजनशिप
ओ सेम जागी
जाइनी जीपी 6 मास तो हेनी व्यस्त काई
हां ठीक अछि आपण थान तो बाइडेन पाखरे थान तो मु भी जाउची आपण पाकू ताइले
आसा वेलकम ओके थैंक यू
अच्छा यस कौन हिमांशु हेलो
I mean, I asked you to give your observation on this talk.
Acha, it's all right. So I listened to the discussions of Gyana. It is indeed an excellent deliberation. Lucid in style, in-depth in analysis. I have no questions to ask to the speaker for clarification. But as a political scientist or as a student of political science, I am grappled with a few fundamental questions. relating to multiculturalism in India. Fundamental questions. As I understand, multiculturalism connotes varieties of cultural patterns that characterize various groups of people of the society. Population of society is composed of a number of groups of people. Every group has a distinct culture of its own. Population is divided in various groups in terms of socio-economic cleavages or divisions or identities, such as race, ethnicity, caste, tribe, group, language, religion, education, income. Varieties of groups are there. So society is essentially a composition of groups of people. Every group has a distinct culture of its own. People live together. Therefore, the society is said to be a multicultural society. And every society in this world is a multicultural society. India is no exception to it. The Western societies are multicultural societies. Asian societies are multicultural societies. People live together. But in case of India, as a citizen of India, I am concerned with this problem of multiculturalism that issues forth in widespread social turmoil and conflicts. We must make a distinction, must make a comparison, and take lessons from the West.
So I think Guru sir has left. Professor Swain, if you want to respond to those observations, you can. Then I will go back to the questions asked by the participants.
No observations, because whatever Guru sir said, they're all fundamental things and there is no point in disagreement. So I have no observations, and whatever Professor Mishra said, they're actually some of the most important background. Sarasle, yeah.
Sir, you have to
Sarasle.
unmute. Sir, you have to unmute.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the interruptions, because someone was calling me and I had to run to the door to open it. So as a student of political science, I am concerned with the problem of multiculturalism in India. And I wish that all political scientists of India must address themselves to this problem of multiculturalism that issues forth in widespread, rampant social turmoil and cleavages, which strikes at national unity and integration. We must live in peace. We must cooperate with one another, despite the fact that Indian society is a multicultural society. So what is the root? Why you are not able to live in peace and order? Why you are not able to cooperate with the different groups of people? We must investigate into the problem as a political scientist or students of political science. We must find remedial measures. What to do? Why the people of India are not able to live in peace with one another? Why different groups, religious groups, caste groups, tribal groups, gender groups, all they conflict with one another? And why you are not able to achieve national integration and unity in the true sense of the term? That is the basic problem which must be addressed by students of political science. Multiculturalism cannot be eradicated. It is a fact of life. It is endemic to every society. We have to accept it. At the same time, we must live in peace and order with one another. So what is the problem here in India? Why it is not so in case of Western societies, developed Western societies? Why it is so in India? We must investigate into it. And I believe the root of the problem is we are unable to form and develop a civic culture in India. Till date, till 70 years of independence, 75 years of independence, we have not been able to develop a civic culture in India. There are varieties of social groups, no doubt, cultural groups, no doubt. But we fight with each other. Why? Why we are not able to sacrifice our parochial allegiances to develop our national allegiance? Parochial allegiances, parochial identities must remain. But at the same time, this must be sacrificed for promoting national allegiance, national interest. Then only can a society develop. Therefore, formation of civic culture is of utmost necessity. And what is that civic culture? A rational, national, political culture. We must be rational. At the same time, we must be national. We must be prepared to sacrifice our parochial interest, personal interest, group interest for promoting national interest. Promotion of national interest doesn't mean that we have to completely eradicate our parochial interest or allegiance. There must be harmonious cooperation, harmonious coexistence between the parochial interest of the individual and the national interest of the individual. That is the fundamental attribute of civic culture. So unless a civic culture is formed in India, there will be no solution to this problem of the menace of multiculturalism, the adverse effects of multiculturalism. And how can that civic culture is formed? Through the process of political socialization. There are varieties of agents in the process of political socialization, the process of political learning. It starts with the family. The individual is born in the family, reared up in the family environment. When he grows up, goes to the school, takes education, takes job later on, mixes with neighbors, friends, colleagues, exposes himself to media communications, mass media, peer group. So family, educational systems or institutions, peer group, mass media, political parties, pressure groups, all these work as very important agents of political socialization for the individual. So people of India need to be politically socialized. And that is the process must start with the family. We must teach our children. You must become national in orientation, rational in orientations. You must have a civic culture. And that same teaching must be provided in the schools, in the peer group, through the mass media, through political parties. So long as we are not able to develop a civic culture in us through the process of political socialization, there will be no end to this problem of social chaos, turmoil, indiscipline, which are born out of multiculturalism in India. So we must find out a solution to this problem, and we must be active in that context. As a students of political science, our duty, our motto must be relevance and action. That is what Easton said in 1969 in his presidential address to the American Political Science Association. We must be relevant. We must be action-oriented. We must not keep ourselves confined only to the classrooms or to the research institutions, doing research in AC rooms. We must not have ivory tower thinking. We must come out. We must go to the field, teach the people, educate them, socialize them. That is our duty as political scientists. So we must teach the students in the classroom as a teacher. We must come out from the classroom, organize meetings, visit the fields, socialize the people, and undertake sincere and persistent endeavors to form civic culture in the people, at least in the new generations, so that there may be a prospect of peaceful coexistence of the people, despite the fact that the society is multicultural. This is what I understand. So I appeal to all political scientists, all students of political science, to come forward and to contribute their best to solve this problem for the benefit of our society. Thank you all.
So thank you, Guru sir. I mean, let me make it known to all audience and especially to Professor Swain. We have Indian Constitution, and Indian Constitution has taken many positive steps to accommodate various groups and other minorities. There is also Hindu philosophy that speaks about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. We have religions like Buddhism and Jainism. But then why till now our social life is in, we are not peacefully coexisting? Why tensions are there till now? Will you say that this is because of the absence of multiculturalism, either from the state side or from the society side, or it is because of the presence of multiculturalism? Why there is a problem? Yes, Professor Swain.
Thank you, esteemed professors, Professor Mishra, Professor Guru, and Dr. Himanshu. Actually, no, nothing to add to what Professor Mishra and Professor Guru said, because these are all elaborate structures that they actually spoke about. But the question that you raised, that despite having a credible multicultural history, why we have conflicts? Is this the question that you want to ask?
Yes, you talked about Hindu philosophy, Buddhism, Jainism, Indian Constitution and its positive steps, but still then Guru sir is worried about peaceful coexistence, and Surya sir is worried about how our society or at the cultural level we don't find multiculturalism, and you cannot impose multiculturalism from the state side.
No.
So what will be your reaction?
See, actually, I'll tell you one thing. See, all these religious practices, it is not that they existed in a very harmonious way, right? There are also occasions when they fought also with each other, right? For example, if you look at Buddhism, it emerged as a challenge to Hinduism, right? Again, with Shankaracharya's coming, Hinduism re-emerged, right? So the point is that we would like to say here is that even also within Hinduism, there are different sects, and there is also a fight. So it is not that and also within Buddhism also there are also different sects, and they also fight between each other, right? So it is not that only the intra-religious fights are also very prominent in India. Within religion also we have several fights, Vaishnavites, Saivites. There are also fights, prominent fights, right? So, but the question is, despite all these fights, we have largely been able to accommodate everyone. The tolerance capacity of India, starting from ancient times to present society, is very, very surprising. That's the point that I would like to add to what Professor Guru said. That somebody asked in the chat box a question about how the problem of multiculturalism can be addressed. Okay, so I think it's two things. This is actually in addition to what Dr. Himanshu same question, same kind of questions. Two things are important to address the question of multiculturalism. One is tolerance, and the other one is, what Professor Guru said, that developing a civic culture. But how that civic culture can be created is something very, very challenging. Okay, so that's the key point. जे केमिति आमे गोटे civic culture टा develop करिबा. For example, some people believe that uniform civil code is an answer to develop a civic culture, right? Some people believe that. Even people have started debating about uniform civil code. Okay, even 50, 60 years back also there was a debate on uniform civil code. Okay, so but we need to debate on developing a civic culture. Okay, and but one thing, when for me, according to me, is that when we debate about civic culture, or when we try to develop a conception of civic culture in any democratic society, one thing that immediately comes to our mind is that in the name of civic culture, if we try to marginalize some populations, right, that's the biggest hurdle in today's debate and discussions. आज जदि यूनिफॉर्म सिविल कोड को नहीं जो डिबेट होची, and people, if some people are worried, it is only because of this question. So if at all we are serious about it, if at all we are serious about the civic engagement and creating a civic culture, first of all we need to address the fear among those people who really fear that this uniform civil code is a process to marginalize them from the society, right? That fear, apprehension has to go away. That's the thing. So Himanshu, so when you say that, I mean, why still it persists? It was persisting much before, but despite those differences, we have been able to manage. For example, I will give you one small example. Let's take the case of Jagannath culture. Okay, Jagannath culture is largely, Vaishnavite culture, but somehow they have been able to accommodate Guru Nanak. Somehow they have been able to accommodate Buddhism. So look at the accommodative aspect of Hinduism, right? So I am giving you one example, but there might be many other examples in in Hinduism scriptures. So I think the accommodative capacity of the larger social discourse is something that we need to celebrate, right? But the problem lies when we try to speak about the political conception of these multicultural societies and how in future they should be governed. Okay, so there again I would say that tolerance and developing a civic culture, but that again civic culture also needs to be addressed by looking at the fear and apprehensions of those minorities. Otherwise, this uniform civil code and all such kinds of debate will not be very, very fruitful. I mean, যদি তুমি minority মানଙ୍କର ଡରଟାକୁ ଆମେ ଦୂର ନ କରିପାରିବା, ତାହେଲେ ମତେ ଲାଗୁ I think this uniform civil code debate will be fruitless. But I entirely agree with
civil code and civic culture are two different things. Civil code is a legal connotation. It is a legal matter.
Sir, I am trying to extend your argument. I am saying that uniform civil code is
there is no certainty, no guarantee that uniform civil code would lead to formation of civic culture. Civic culture
That's
is
what
a psychological phenomenon. It is inherent in the mind of man.
No, sir. I said some people.
I need here 1 minute.
You have to change human nature. The present human nature.
Sir, I am coming to you.
I will need 1 minute.
Yes, Surya sir, I am giving it to you. Sir, I am giving it to you.
Am I permitted?
Yes,
Well, I thank SP Guru for solving my problem, because the way he addressed the issue of accepting parochialism, but at the same time one has to have a national vision. And when you develop this, tolerance, understanding, accommodation automatically revives. Gone are the melting pot approach. United States of America also suffered because of melting pot approach. because they rejected all non-whites on the ground of melting pot because you cannot assimilate. And when Great Society concept came, it was shifted from melting pot to Salar Baul approach. That everybody will maintain its identity and together we will be Americans. But beyond that, what Guru has mentioned, that to have parochialism under control, nationalism blown. So that, for that, my suggestion is, because we are living in a diverse society, India is a polyglot society, in order to have a pluricultural base ensured and assured, we must have generated, or we must generate now onwards, appreciation of diversity. That is what he said. Let us propagate the concept of appreciation. Inside the classroom, if you discuss, it will have no impact on the society. Let us go beyond the classroom so that the society can understand what is multiculturalism, what is appreciation of diversity. Then somehow or other, Bindu Bindu Sindhu Sustiyala Bharya, we can expand this idea of retaining parochialism under control and expanding nationalism at the higher level. That is the best solution, I believe, which Guru has presented. Thank you.
So thank
Agreed,
you,
sir,
thank you,
agreed.
sir.
Why not? In that context, Himanshu has taken a lead. He's coming out from the classroom. He's coming out from the classroom and educating the people at large.
Thank you.
He serves as an agent of.
I am taught by you today. You have enlightened me.
Now that is what I understood from multiculturalism. So I think we have to go beyond our parochial interests.
Yes.
At the same time, we should have a vision for the others. Then only I think that fraternity is possible.
Restrained parochialism and blown up nationalism.
Yes. We have to change our psychology. We have to change our mindset and nature. Unless we change ourselves, society will not change.
No, thank you everyone. But I have a small introduction to Professor Swain. I mean, if you are saying that individual and their community, they are peacefully existing, why you are repetitively saying that? But despite of everything, Hinduism has accommodated every community, or Jagannath culture has accommodated different cults within it. But then why minorities are not satisfied? Are you saying that it is something, it is because of their parochial attitude, or it was an intentional dissatisfaction to get the support from the state resources?
It is a combination of
fear, insecurity, and politically unaccommodative situation and benefiting other communities by reservation. There are multiple issues which has created minoritism in India. And this minoritism can be addressed, what Guru has said.
My point is that the kind of words you are attaching to the minorities, that fear, insecurity, I mean, these are the words we can also use for the majority community also, because there are sections in the majority community, they are also feeling insecure, they are also fearful, they also need state patronization.
Why? Why?
Because
why they feel insecure? Because we do not practice what we profess. We profess of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, but at the same time, we are very selfish in our orientations and activities. Unless we sacrifice this self.
Sir, here my question is that generally theory and philosophy is derived from the human practices. If human practices or Hindu practices was very much parochial, then how this Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that concept was generated? And it got.
You see, I have told you in my observation that we have given politics priority over culture.
Yes.
That when you give politics priority over culture, such type of irredentism comes in. And this irredentism can be addressed, what Guru has suggested, controlled parochialism, restricted parochialism,
Yes.
and blown up nationalism. That is one process where we can appreciate diversity, and minorityism will evaporate. Majorityism will not be there. Understanding of the society, culture, polity, and economy can be there through the policy
Yes.
of accommodation and understanding.
And that can be done only through the process of socialization. We are
Yes.
to be socialized.
Yes.
Otherwise, there is no end to the problem.
Okay, Himanshu,
So
don't
until and
mind.
unless
You,
yeah, I got it.
Himanshu,
Until
don't
and-
mind. You have called me. I have come. Now nature has called me. I am going.
Okay, I understand. I understand. So until and unless we appreciate the other, multiculturalism cannot thrive.
Yes.
That's the point. So Professor Swain, if you want to further respond, you can respond. Otherwise, I will go back to the questions asked by the participants.
No, let's discuss on the questions.
Yes.
Okay. Brindaman, are you there? You can directly ask question to our speaker. Brindaman.
Brindavan
Yes,
is
sir.
very
Sir,
sincere
namaste.
and a regular participant.
My warm respect to all the dignified.
Yes, yes, Brindavan.
Yes, Brindavan, you can continue.
Sir, thank you so much, sir. My warm, my
What?
Now, Brindavan, you are not
Audible,
audible.
not
You are not
audible.
audible.
regards to
Let me read your questions. Okay, you have asked what
To
are
all
the
the
major challenges?
You, Brindavan, your device needs to be repaired or reset.
dignitaries. My warm regards to all the dignitaries.
Okay, I have muted Brindavan. It's okay. Let me ask the question asked by Brindavan. What are the major challenges before the government of India?
Yes.
Brindavan, let me read your question because you are facing some network problems. What are the major challenges before government of
Sir.
India in implementing a solid?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, what are the major obstacles in achieving multiculturalism in India? Although we have a natural defense, although India is a ancient country having multiculturalism in its setting example, but in present context we have failed a lot. Miserably we have failed. Why, sir? What are the major challenges? Sir, my question is that what are the major challenges before achieving multiculturalism?
Okay, Professor Swain.
So,
It should be made.
Professor Swain, you can respond.
Yes. See, basically, Brindavan Babu is asking what are the major challenges to multiculturalism. See, there are, the challenges of multiculturalism are already evident from what we see today's contemporary political situation, right? But safely we can say, that tolerance, if that capacity to tolerate, I mean, if you go back to the classical Lockean tradition, John Stuart Mill's position, I mean, tolerance, respecting diversity, developing, lack of a civic virtue, civic culture, I mean, these are all very, very important elements when we speak about multiculturalism. So safely we can say that absence of these inputs, they pose a threat to the existence of multiculturalism. Okay, but the second important question I think I can see from the chat box that you asked, I think same question, I think same Brindavan Babu is asking.
It's Maharashtra issues.
Maharashtra issue of blowing loudspeaker, a failure of
creating a
creating,
civic culture.
which is the no भाई ऐसा है माने मते देखो माने कथा ला जे why you think only that blowing loudspeakers, see I'll tell you what is the exactly, let me read it. I mean, in what capacity, yes, So did you mean all kinds of religious places or only you mean mosques?
No, sir, all the religions.
Then definitely yes. माने खाली कोन मस्जिद रे हबो मंदिर रे हबो नि समस्त सब जगह रे लाउड स्पीकर लागिले इट इज ए पब्लिक न्यूसेंस देयर इज नो देयर शुड बी नो डिस्कशन अबाउट इट ओके बट द पॉइंट इज आमे खाली आई मीन वी ओनली आइडेंटिफाई द बॉस बट वी फॉरगेट दैट आमे आई मीन वी कंटिन्यूअसली engage in you know sort of activity, let's say DJ during marriage ceremony. Is it not a public nuisance? रास्ता रे जो जाउचे जो बाजा बजे की जाउचे एवं डीजे बजे की जाउचे is it not a public nuisance? Okay, so I mean we need to be very I mean introspective जे आमे जो सब करूचे सेटा भी whether they are they challenge to
sir I beg your pardon sir I beg your pardon I just interrupt you sir you know from history it is revealed that once upon a time India has been a torch bearer of civilization. Peaceful coexistence,
yes,
peaceful coexistence among the civil communities had been the guiding principles of Indian society. But nowadays, you know, the irony of the fact is that we have mutual distrust, we have mutual fearness. You know, why such things are happening, and what are the you know suggestive way to overcome all these challenges? So, loudspeaker is not an issue, but mutual fearness, mutual distrust. You know, these are the major issues. So my question is that what are the suggestive approaches or suggestive measures to overcome all these issues?
Okay, see, there was a time when India was a leader. Okay, even today also India is a leader. You look at many other diverse countries, you will find that India is much more safer. Okay, but the most important element of that is required is that continuous process of dialogue among different communities is not happening today. माने जो dialogue process टा हवा कथा सेटा ही परुनी different communities मानक भितरे, and largely we have become more and more institutionalized. We are dependent on courts, we are dependent on parliament, we are dependent on executive agencies to implement something which could have actually been possible through dialogues among different communities. So once the potential of dialogue is actually marginalized, and you look at the courts, you look at the institutions to protect the multicultural values, so sometimes, once the institutions they fail or they are politicized, you are bound to fail. So the inner strength of the communities, right, to negotiate and set a dialogue process between different communities is something that we are not trying to revive, and we are not trying to adopt. पूर्वरु कोन होतला जेतबेले एंशिएंट टाइम्स रे गोटे डायलॉग प्रोसेस सब बेले चली थिला, that continuous negotiation with different existence that was happening, जोत पे की गोटे सोसाइटी रे पीस थिला, right? But
that how can it be possible, sir? How can it be possible when we are intolerant now?
Let me answer to you. I mean, as long as we have not dematerialized ourselves, the dialogue is not possible. So
Yes,
we need to dematerialize ourselves. We need to appreciate the other, genuine appreciation. It's not appreciation before the camera. It's the genuine appreciation.
Sir, but we are highly intolerant. We are not in a position to sacrifice, and we are not in a position to take suffering. We are thinking for our own self. But how can it be possible?
We are under the influence of matter, not the influence of spiritualism. There are also good essence of your personality, but you are not impacted by that good essence. So everything, it's there within the human body. Whether you are guided by that or not depends on you. Accordingly, you are creating a society. Accordingly, you are creating a space for the dialogue. Okay. The next question, let me go back to my student, MPhil student. She has worked on her MPhil thesis, MPhil dissertation, Secularism in a Multicultural Society, the Case of India. That is the title of her dissertation. Swagatika Sahu, you can directly ask question to the speaker. Swagatika, are you there? Yes, he's there. Professor Swain, let me read the question of Swagatika. How does multiculturalism manage a balance between communities, culture, and social reform? Yes, Professor Swain.
How does multiculturalism manage a balance between communities, culture, and social reform? Okay. Acha, Swagatika, acha, line re. Are you there, Swagatika?
Yes, sir.
Can you please elaborate your question, please?
Sir, every community has a different kind of culture, and in their culture there are some lacuna. So, how to manage multiculturalism to make a balance between community culture and their social reform?
See, multiculturalism, takes place at one level, but social reforms takes place through variety of ways. You must be knowing it, either through institutional intervention or through, gradual reforms in the society. See, if you look at the history of development, social development, there are certain reforms which have been made through institutional intervention, right? But there are also certain reforms which have been made in a very gradual way, right? So, when we say that multiculturalism, see, the core of multiculturalism is respecting others, and you also expect that they will respect you, right? So it has no direct linkage with social reforms. And dita jaka mate lage je parallel heiki chale, right? Social reforms ta gote straight line e jauchi, and whenever there is a requirement of reforms, they do it, whether either through institutional intervention or through social progress in a gradual way. And also sometimes revolution is also another cause of change. But here multiculturalism goes simultaneously. It is not that ki dita jaka eka sangare gotiye mane ତାଙ୍କ ଭିତରେ ସେମିତି ଗୋଟେ କିଛି ଇଏ ନାହିଁ, ରିଲେସନସିପ୍ ମତେ ଲାଗେ ନାହିଁ ଯୋଉଟା କି ଏକ୍ଜିଷ୍ଟ କରୁଛି, ଯୋଉଟା କି ସେଇଟା କେମିତି ଯାଉଛି, right? But definitely they are very, very important and related, but they go simultaneously, right? This is how I would like to respond.
Okay.
But
so thank you.
There is another question by Shubham Tripathi. Okay, basically what Shubham is asking that is India not more safer than outside countries? Yes, India is more safer, no doubt about it. But that doesn't mean that it is a very qualified statement, right? So, definitely we are safer, no doubt about it. But the question is, one must feel, very positive about the atmosphere, right? One must feel that. For example, I will say that you take the case of Odisha, and you take the case of some other parts of, India. Let's say Hindus in Kashmir, or Muslims in Uttar Pradesh. I'm giving you specific examples. And you take the case of Odisha. Odisha is relatively more or less peaceful, right? Similarly, look at the apprehensions of these communities in these particular states, right? So, this is a very qualified statement. Overall context, no doubt people are more safer. But still, situation have to be improved, I would say this. I don't want to comment more on this question.
So thank you, Professor Swain. We don't have any further questions. So we are at the last part of this event. Now, I assign giving vote of thanks to my PhD student, Abhipsa Tripathi. Abhipsa, are you there? Maybe she is not there actually. She is facing some network problem. So let me do that function, no problem. So thank you, today's speaker, Professor Swain. Thank you for your deliberation. Thank you for your answer. And thank you for enlightening all of us the multiculturalism in Indian context and the problems of multiculturalism in Indian context. And thank you, Professor Guru, for your for your observation, for your comment. Thank you, Professor Surjanarana Mishra, for your observation as well. Thank you, all participants, those who have asked questions and those who haven't asked also. So those who have asked question, they got a kind of clarification. Those who haven't asked question, they got a kind of understanding. So congratulate to all of you for your for getting the clarification, for getting the understanding. So thank you overall. It's thank you to all.
Thank you, Himanshu, and thank you, Professor Guru, and all other people who was present here. Thank you all.
Thank you
So
so much, sir. Namaskar.
Namaskar. Okay, so I am withdrawing.
Yeah, of course.